However, there will be no public comment during this discussion among the council. Any additional uninvited presenters can turn over whatever information they have to the village clerk. So first, we're going to have Angela and Lori.
Amy Bell.
Amy
and
Bell,
Angela.
excuse me, the parking lot. Is Amy here? She is. Oh, I didn't see you back there. Saw your dad. Now, you guys did this once before in June, last summer, right?
I don't believe so.
Oh, what?
Not this topic. I did not.
Not the parking lot.
A-
I thought Amy did the parking lot.
Amy did a presentation for us.
So.
Yeah.
Angela, you didn't.
Yes.
Well, y'all have a seat, please. This will put you closer to the microphone.
This is my first in-person work study, so that's why I'm thinking no. But
Okay. All right. I would say give a brief description of how it all occurred. We have a little synopsis in the front, and then we'll let the counselors ask you questions. Is that okay?
Sounds great, yeah.
All right.
And I'll, Angela, if you don't mind, I'll start because, let's see if I can get that closer. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because I think this project started actually before Angela was the Main Street director. This project started when Sandy Rasmussen was still the director. And I'll introduce myself real quick. My name's Amy Bell. I am a landscape architect with a company called Groundwork Studio. And we are a consultant with the State of New Mexico Main Street program. And super quick, the way that the New Mexico Main Street program works is if your community is lucky enough to have a Main Street organization, which is obviously a partnership between the local government and a nonprofit, and Corrales has Corrales Main Street. The way that the state program works is because you have that program that meets those national accreditation benchmarks. You have amazing people like Angela and the Main Street Board working on these projects. Your community has access to free technical assistance in the 4 points of Main Street, which includes design, both architectural and landscape architectural, promotion, organization or capacity building, and economic vitality. And so as a consultant to the state, we provide this technical assistance, design technical assistance to Main Street communities at no cost to you, right? So it's a great benefit. It's a great resource. The thing that's really important about any of the projects that we work on through New Mexico Main Street is that these are projects that have been requested by the community and are community-led. And so this is not the state saying you should do things a certain way. This is not me or my company saying you should do things a certain way. This is us listening to what the community has asked for and putting together ideas based on that. So I believe previous mayor requested that we come take a look based on, there was I think an ad hoc committee put together to look at both Law and Charter Park and the Village Administration Complex. We looked at those areas and decided, there's some work that could be done to the administrative complex that would help improve circulation, would help improve safety, would help increase open space and green space for the village. And so then Corrales Main Street did what's called a service request. And so they put a request into the state to say, we'd like to have one of your New Mexico Main Street consultants come in and work on this project with us. And over a period of several months, we met with various village staff, Parks and Rec, police, Public Works. We put together the plan that I think you all have in your packet that shows, I think clear delineation of parking spaces and then consolidating open space, creating a little parklet next to the existing community room. And in looking at this new layout, we tried to maintain all of the parking spaces. We know parking is really important, especially when court is in session. We know that the parking lot fills up. But we wanted to try to balance, this is a, village, this is a public space. How do we get all the cars in here and then also create space for a community gathering? And so the layout that you have in your packet was one that was developed. We were looking at utilities, looking at vehicular circulation needs for day-to-day use, but also when there's events and we have vendors setting up in the parking area. And at that point, I think that was around 2020, and things just kind of went on hold for a little while, the way they did with a lot of stuff in 2020. And so we came back and revisited this project, just in 2022? This was just this last fall we did that, right? Yeah. And put boards up, in Village Hall, a couple of other places in town, the community room where people could put sticky notes and make comments and ask questions. And Hanselman Pottery, yeah. And, I think got some good feedback, and then we presented at council, whenever that was. Time is weird
It was
these days.
June.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And I think, we've also produced a cost estimate so that the village could, look at funding for supporting the project. The project is eligible for New Mexico Main Street specific capital outlay. That's another benefit that Main Street communities have. Every year there's a budget that's allocated for Main Street communities only for state capital outlay. Last year it was 10 million, this year it's 10 million. I believe your cultural plan is currently being funded by capital outlay. So this project, both the design and the construction would be eligible to apply for that capital outlay funding if it was needed and the timing worked out. Angela, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I feel like that does cover, and then we went through a couple versions, right, with some of the changes.
Though the animal,
The
yeah.
animal spot, and so, I believe that's, everybody's caught up, at least from what I, where I came into all of it, so.
Any questions? Council Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor. So what did you estimate the cost to be? Was it 100,000? Is that one?
The initial estimate, thank you, Counselor. The initial estimate was around $500,000 or $600,000.
Okay.
But what we've been working with the estimate is, I think there's a fair amount of things that the village could self-perform. And so you would not necessarily need to pay a contractor to do the work. Things like demolition, some of the other, I think repaving, and so there, there's cost savings that are available, and I think we did a more recent estimate that took some of those savings into consideration.
Yeah, because I think the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended crusher fines instead of paving the parking lot, so
Right.
that would be a considerable savings, I would think.
Well, I think the plan, I think, called for asphalt millings, but the intent was for it to be permeable, because in order for planning and zoning to approve it, there has to be, there can only be so much of a percentage of impermeable surfaces. And so I think we had looked at a recommendation to pave the drive lanes, so where we have vehicles driving more frequently and not paving the parking spaces, but I think we had to reduce some of that even to comply with the village code.
Well, I'm referring to the Planning and Zoning Commission recent site development plan where they recommended crusher fines be instead of paving. I believe that's what I understand.
That's correct. That added some cost. The crusher fines added some cost to the,
Well, how would that add cost if you're reducing the paving?
sorry, what?
How would that reduce the cost of if you're reducing paving, isn't that saving you some money?
No, the crusher fines are pricey, as I understand it. And what they were going to use was recycled asphalt that we have access to.
But recycled asphalt has problems from what I have read.
Correct, and we're not going to do that. We're going to
Okay.
do crusher fines.
That's why I want to make sure.
Yes, it's correct. That's why it was okay.
So my other question I have, looking at the drawing, there is a lot of interaction of two-way traffic, it looks like, on the north portion of that. I know it's one way coming into the by the administration offices, but you have two-way traffic in your parking right by the animal services and then also by the planning and zoning. Seems to me you might be running into some safety issues with that because I don't know about the frequency of the traffic might be, but it looks like it's pretty constrained right in that area. Any thoughts?
I mean, I guess I would say, you know, the plan that y'all have and the site plan that was approved, you know, was a conceptual plan. We didn't have a site survey working on that, and so, you know, those are things that would need to be confirmed. I believe the two-way at the northernmost entrance was a request of the village staff at the time to maintain that as a two-way.
Yeah.
But certainly, safety is a priority.
Well, yeah, especially if you have bicyclists in the administration. I mean, there's doesn't appear to be a connection from the planning and zoning office over to the council chambers or anything like that in terms of sidewalks. I do see sidewalk going from the community room down towards the senior citizen center. I'm trying to look and see if there's any connection from that area over to the administration, and I don't see that either. So I'm a little concerned that maybe the interconnectivity between these buildings is not quite flushed out yet.
Sure, yeah, my memory is that the only pedestrian connection that was going to be paved was between Village Hall and the court.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Yes, Mayor, Councilors, how many parking places are there currently in the complex? Do you know?
Let me grab my plan, because we have that on the plan materials, and I don't have it in my brain.
Are you asking the complex total parking, senior center too?
I don't, if you have it broken down.
I think it was 97. I want to say 97 for some reason, but
What do you think?
97?
Oh, okay.
Was it something like that, Amy?
Yeah, my printout blocked off the total number of spaces, but we maintained an equal amount.
Okay, so
I
we
have
don't,
parking spaces removed 34, parking spaces added 34.
okay, so we don't lose any, we don't gain any, so it remains the same, okay.
Correct, Counselor, yeah.
Is there a match for the funding coming from the Main Street Fund? Capital
Typically,
outlay?
it's 20%.
20% match? Okay. And the figures we have are approximately $660,000 plus another 10% for design. Is that sound about right?
Yes, Counselor.
Okay. And you're proposing to keep the north entrance open as it currently is, the north entrance of the parking lot?
To the, yes, yeah, the north entrance. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what this layout does propose.
And you would have, so you would have that entrance, you would have the entrance just in front of the administrative building, you'd have the entrance or exit by police vehicles as well as by the senior center, so four ins and outs,
Correct.
basically? Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor.
John.
Thank you, Mayor. To follow up on one of Councilor Wildman's questions, the 20% match, is that a Main Street 20% match and we do 80, or is that the other way around? We put up 20% and the 80% comes magically from grants?
The village would supply the 20%, and I'd say also with
Okay.
the challenges that communities have been facing with COVID, there has been consideration to reduce that match amount, and it's also possible if the village had other grant support, had standard capital outlay, a lot of that can be used as that match. It doesn't have to be a straight cash match. There's a percentage that's able to be in kind. I don't know what that is off the
All right,
top
good.
of my
Yeah,
head, though.
right. Second question is, what kind of considerations are there for the transition between the current state and whatever the final state is in terms of maintaining access and timeframes and all of that?
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. That's a really good question. That's really important to be able to maintain access to all of the different buildings, maintain parking. Those are logistics that would be worked out during the design process and to some extent with the contractor in terms of their staging and their means and methods for construction.
Okay, so a little early for that detail yet. Okay, thank you.
But it is really important to consider that, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I would say also, you know, a lot of the work that we do as part of our design technical assistance is construction mitigation related. So working with main streets when they're going to have their streetscape renovated to make sure that businesses still have access and getting a lot of that information out for folks. So I think, we could provide that additional support in this case too.
My next question might be for you, Mayor.
Fire away.
I'm just not sure procedurally, in this format, how would we bring into discussion the alternative plan? I'll refer to it as the...
It's not up for discussion.
So that's not part of this discussion whatsoever? Okay, thank you very much. That's good.
No, our next plan is to take the funds that we have and move forward with the design and construction of the crusher fines on the parking lot. And that'll be, that's what we consider a transition because we don't have $650,000. We'll have to, we would like to move forward on getting some capital money from the legislature for that. Yes, sir, Zach.
So just to follow up on the question from Councilor Alsobrook, if there are other ideas we'd like to introduce and maybe modify the site plan, what is the process for that? Because I think what we have, I think 90% of that I like, but I think there's maybe some ideas in the community as far as walkability, rideability of the village, things we're really trying to promote. There's some projects between the central drain and the Gonzalez property that we're really trying to focus on, and the connectivity of all of those things, I think maybe we could improve. So I definitely don't want to give a hard yes to the current plan without there being some discussion about maybe some minor modifications to it. But like I said, 90% of this, I think is still great. I think there's a couple general ideas I'd like to discuss further.
So I don't know what you meant by a hard yes.
Well, so we already have a site plan in place.
Correct.
I'm concerned that we are going to just move forward with that site plan without discussion of maybe some potential design modifications of that. And I want to make sure that we have part of the process, the ability to modify those designs in some way before we do start putting crusher fines on the ground.
Well, so we want to fix the parking lot to where it can be utilized more appropriately and efficiently.
Yeah.
And we don't have that kind of money, so we're phasing it. We're going to do the crusher fines and clean up some of the concrete that we have out there. Now, if you want to do, further plans, further changes or modifications, then I would suggest you come up with a plan.
Okay, well, I think that's something we need to do, particularly if we can get an 80-20 split. I'd rather us invest our 20%, even though that's only a fraction of it, to what we want the final design to be. And I know there's some stuff that has to get done now, some maintenance type issues. If we can list what those are and then not invest any money in anything beyond that until we are completely happy with the optimized design, I think that would serve us better in the long term.
Well, the reason we want to do the things that we want to do to improve the parking lot and improve some of the other available buildings that are here is because we have those funds.
Right.
We don't have all the funds for all the parking lots, so we're basically phasing it. We're doing what we can with what we have.
How much do we have as far as funds right now? For
We have
that?
$275 for the parking lot, and we
So
have
then-
$250 for the animal services building. Is that correct?
Animal Services Building is
246 plus 25,
270 something, 279.
something like that?
Something like that.
Okay.
So that 275 is way more than what we need for 20% of this project.
No, you don't understand. That's for the animal services building, period.
Well, I thought. you
That's what
said
that money is
on
for.
Animal services, there were $2. a
Yes,
month.
that's a pot of money for the animal services building, and then we have a pot of money for the parking lot,
And that pot was 275 for the.
275.
So we could do 1.2 million, 1.3 million if we're doing only 20% of it, which is double what this project is projected at. I mean, it sounds like we have the money now to do a
No, we
full
can't.
version.
We can't do that.
Why
We
not?
can't get that money.
Well,
We can get it next year.
okay, I guess, yeah, so if I can ask you guys, so what is the timing on that process? If we were to say, we like this plan, we want to make modifications A, B, and C, we want Main Street to be part of this, we want to utilize the funding leverage, when we say yes and fill out the paperwork, what's that process look like time-wise?
So the funding becomes available July 1
Okay.
this year. I believe the call for applications is going to go out, month before that,
Okay.
month or two before that, which is coming up here pretty soon. And I think, you can't apply for the construction, the implementation funding until you have fully complete construction documents.
Right.
So if you wanted to this year apply for the funding for the design for the construction documents, you would be able to submit an application before July this year and then have access to those funds this year. The one thing that we will need to check, because Corrales has capital outlay funds that are currently in play for the cultural plan, is whether enough of that has been drawn down for you to apply again. But that's a real quick conversation with the Main Street director.
Okay.
We can work that out.
But it sounds like the timing, if we were particularly motivated and wanted to try to get these plans finalized sooner than later and get necessary votes done for that July 1st could be realistic timing to actually fund this if you guys select it as one of the projects to fund.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want
Yes,
to
sir.
clarify.
Councilor Mira.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to go down the same path Counselor was at, but my questions are regarding that July 1st and the accessibility to the 10 million. That's statewide.
Correct.
So, I mean, this is a really hard question for you, but I mean, how much do you think we can get out of the 10 million? We can talk about our 10%, but I mean, the reality is, what you just said and what the mayor said, he talked about phasing in, but can we use some of that money for design and development, or just design alone, which would help us? But if we have to include development, then we just put ourselves behind the 8 ball on that one, if we're going to use them for both, because we're not ready for the design development, because we're only doing phase 1 or phase 2 of maybe 4 or 5 phases, I'm not sure, but how much of that could we ask for in a grant if we're only going to be utilizing partial parts of it and asking the state that you got for monies?
So I just want to back up really quick. Zach, when you're referring to like amending the documents.
Yep.
So could that be a service request?
I don't even think
new
we'd need a
one?
new service request. We
Okay.
could just do it.
Okay, and the reason I ask that, I just kind of want to intervene. I'm fairly certain that the capital outlay project that we're involved in now with the cultural plan would prohibit us from applying in this cycle for anything. However, if that service request is still active, or if we needed to, utilize another one, I think we have eight per year.
We could just work with the one we've got. We don't need a new one.
Okay, so if we wanted to just, complete that and revisit the drawings, I just want to make sure I'm following you correctly, so that we are ready to apply for, the capital outlay when that comes again, that would probably be the next cycle. But I think considering that this service request is still active and open, we could do what you're saying with that, 10% of community input, et cetera. We're happy with 90% of it, but we want to make a few amendments that would apply to that service request, and then we could move forward, I think, with the next cycle of capital outlay. But that's the way I understand everything that's going on right now.
I'm following you until you got to that point, and you said next one, because we were initially talking about this one. So now, with that question being proposed, I don't know if we have access, because I wanted to get back to, and we will, I hope, be able to do design and development, because sometimes they're very, very tricky about that one. They'll say, okay, you can do design or development, do both, but you've got to have the whole plan. And we're talking about phasing in here, so I'm not so sure that we don't get ourselves locked up in something we think we can get some money for, but we don't know till next time around. I don't know what the new regulations will be for that 10 million or 12, or could be whatever that you have. So that's why I want to talk about this year's, since you brought it up.
Yes, thank you, Counselor. There's a few questions I'll try to answer there. I think first, it is, the Main Street capital outlay becomes available on an annual basis. So July 1 this year, July 1 next year. The total amount of money fluctuates based on what the legislature approves. So we've been lucky. We've gotten 10 million the last 2 years. It's great. Main Street is doing really great work and it's got strong support from the legislature, which is really cool. I think, in terms of the phasing, our recommendation is always invest in the design first and have that design process inform your phasing so that you don't do something in phase 1 that you have to undo in phase 3, right? That being said, I think if there's initial phases that the village is moving forward with, and then the construction documents aren't necessarily funded by Main Street Capital Outlay until next year, you would begin that construction document development using the existing conditions that are in place at that time. So if a phase 1 has been implemented, your design would be based on, the crusher fines being in the parking lot. My concern with that is just not having a survey. The site is pretty flat, and I think we'd want to make sure that any kind of, installation of crusher fines or other pavement is accounting for drainage, and making sure we're not putting water in any buildings or creating situations with standing water, and that we're sending water, there's that ditch just north of the senior center that I think we want to be putting water into. But, perhaps the village has funds to support construction documents in the meantime, and then you go for the capital outlay next year when you have those complete, and you can ask for more money.
Thank you. That's kind of where I thought you were going to land
Okay,
up at
good,
it. And I
good.
just wanted to make it clear, but they're having a high-ranking discussion over there, so I'll wait till they get finished on that
Oh,
one.
yeah, I'm
Because
sorry.
I think that her last point was, if you heard, that was the point that I was going to be looking over to yourself and say, do we have that money to do our own design with our monies? Because if not, we're going to get ourselves over there in the jam on that end. And if they say, my first question was design and development, if it's included in there, boy, you're in really good shape. But boy, I tell you, it doesn't work that way. They usually say it's for design and you can use your money for development or vice versa. But if you can get them both, then you're locked into whatever design you have when you let it out and you didn't have phase 1 or phase 2. But if you're clear on that one, we're all right. So the question lines up where you landed up with the answer is, should we be using our own monies for design and trying to come back later on for just development, which could just as easily be accessible, Mr. Mayor? I don't know.
We are using the $275,000 for design and construction. We've had survey work done by Steve Grohlman to identify issues that we have on the site, and we're going to move forward on that part. Other parts, $500,000, 400,000, whatever it turns out to be, we will have to request either through Main Street or through the just capital outlay. I mean, that's sort of the plan. Because this has actually been going on about 4 years. And we had capital outlay from 2020.
21.
So it's kind of 2020. It's kind of getting toward the end of its life.
That's right.
And so we need to use that money. And so that's why we're doing, if you want to think of it as an in-house design and construction, it's sort of like that because we got the funds from our court as well as the capital outlay for the $275,000.
That last statement you made makes me feel a little bit better because we're utilizing our monies, but we're just going to be able to.
So other
get the money.
changes that you would like to see on this parking lot can be discussed. I mean, it's just because we've done a little bit here doesn't mean we can't do more. And it doesn't mean we won't be able to do more. As Amy said, we may have to modify a little bit, but the parking lot needs to be fixed. It's got issues. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor and council, I did find the number of parking spaces is 91, according to this plan. Going way back in the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, we're going to, Councilor Alsobrooke.
Just a follow-up. So the Phase 1 crusher fines, I understand that's as much maintenance as it is improvement because of the needs. Is there anything about that that constrains future modifications?
No, it's a parking lot.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah. I mean-
I'm just checking, and no one's going to get upset if we say, all this crusher fine, this 400 square feet of crusher fine, yeah, that's going to go somewhere else.
No, it's just a
Thank you.
parking lot, and that's all we want to try to get in place because we have issues with parking, and we have issues with just accessibility and safety and concerns. And we have occasional puddles here, and that'll be dealt with. If Michael is the one doing it, he'll take care of that when he's grading the place. And that's what I mean. A lot of this is we're going to try to do a lot of this in-house as much as we can, because initially we're running out of time for this initial capital outlay. Okay, we're going to move on, please, to the next subject.
Mayor, if I could.
Last one.
There are a number of citizens in the audience.
No, only those who are invited will speak.
So my question is, we all have this plan they've come up with, about a dozen members. When is the opportunity that they will have to discuss
Not today.
their ideas?
Not today.
Do we know when?
No,
Next council meeting then.
We said
no. We'll discuss that. Okay?
Okay.
Mayor, I just don't want to get locked into doing something that we're going to regret later on, that's all.
No, I agree with you. We don't want to regret anything.
Can I ask one more quick question, Mayor?
Yes, sir, last one.
So are we intending to spend the 275,000 in its totality to do these improvements? Because that's 50% of what this project is, just to put a Band-Aid on something until we do.
We're going to get a design, we're going to have a design, and then we're going to have construction as we can.
I mean, I feel like we have most of a design.
Okay,
We
noted.
have the ability to leverage our funds.
What you said is noted, and we're moving on to the next topic.
I know we're getting railroaded.
Next topic is short-term rental occupational limitations, excuse me. Laurie, do you want to talk briefly about that?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, boss. I just want to give you a little bit of a kind of how we got to the point where we are today. The short-term rental ordinance was passed by the governing body around the end of 2019. And then in response to the Planning and Zoning Commission's concerns based on some short-term rental applications they were starting to hear, we realized we had no occupancy limit, and there was a tweak needed for parking spaces. How many parking spaces are needed for a short-term rental? So in response to that, the commission's concerns, ordinance number 20-005 was brought before the council. That would have been somewhere early in 2020. And what it did was clarify parking requirements and occupancy. And Randy Audio wanted to add a couple of tweaks to the appeal process and penalties for violation of any of the ordinances. And the language originally said no more than 2 total occupants per bedroom being used as a short-term rental. So then I looked up some of the discussion, and actually, Councilor Burkett, you had said during one of the meetings that you would like to change the language about the total number of occupants, that the council had talked about it extensively and thought it might be better just to say adults because it could be prohibitive to families. And then Randy Audio responded and said, yes, we've worked on a change. Randy Audio had written something that ended up being adopted as a floor amendment that night. And what he wrote was 2 adults per bedroom, but adding children 12 and under staying with a parent or guardian are not covered by the occupancy limit if the size of the room accommodates it and it is allowed by the owner or operator of the dwelling unit. So then subsequently, as you're probably aware, the Planning and Zoning Commission has still kind of bumped up against this whole occupancy. You heard an appeal not too long ago where it was a 3-bedroom house, and what they originally had projected or asked for was 6 adults and 6 children. And they didn't really have to limit themselves to 6 children, 12 and under. There's really no limit. So where they're getting a little heartburn about that is presumed septic capacities, among other things. I mean, neighbors don't necessarily want 15 people on a house next to them. And that may be a reasonable ask, but NMED looks at septic capacity, so 3-bedroom house with a 3-bedroom septic tank. Really what the state is thinking is 2 people in one bedroom, 2 people in another bedroom, and then 1 person in the third bedroom. So that would be an occupancy of 5. Now, what's been brought up in some of the Planning and Zoning Commission discussions is that for a short-term rental business, getting 60 to 70% occupancy, that's a pretty good rental. You're not rented all the time typically. You get Balloon Fiesta, you get some other things. So there's probably not going to be that many people in the house 365 days a year. So they've kind of grappled with the occupancy limit being a little open-ended. And that's kind of why we're here, I guess.
Well, I guess why we're here is to try to clarify, because all of us were sort of, taken aback by the issues when we did the appeal, or at least I was. And I think the concern is in our village, because everybody's on a well and a septic tank, that you don't want to have an unlimited number of people, and children are people, potentially contaminating groundwater.
Yeah, what I've really seen from Planning and Zoning Commission when they look at these is they're kind of going back to the 2 total occupants per bedroom. And keep in mind that residential short-term rentals can't have more than 4 bedrooms being used for the business. But even with 2 people per bedroom, that would be, a family with 6 kids, or 2 families with a couple kids. So that's kind of where their mindset is, and they did put in a pretty strict occupancy limit on the one that you heard on appeal. So they're having quite a bit of heartburn with this sort of unlimited 12 and under, which applicants will definitely take advantage of.
Who's having the heartburn, P&Z or?
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Yeah. So do they have recommendations?
Well, the original recommendation came from them, which was 2 persons per bedroom in a short-term rental.
6 people.
If it's 3-bedroom, or 8 people in
Or
a
8
4-bedroom house, yeah.
And so if you're, a couple with 4 children, you have 6 people.
And you can
Or
run
if
a
you had 2
3-bedroom.
families with 6
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
which is 12.
And I mean, if there was a compromise needed, maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, babies 1 and under who are in diapers anyway could be exempt.
Is there a way to get some kind of a recommendation from NMED how to deal with this that's firm?
They are very reluctant to do that. I mean, I could just look at state law and say that the way they look at it is 2 adults in 1 bedroom, typically, you're talking about a family, 2 people in bedroom number 2, and then 1 person in every bedroom thereafter. And that's considering 100% occupancy, though.
So I guess the reason this is on here is because of the final disposition of that appeal that we did, where it was basically 5 people. And it didn't seem like we had any, it didn't really seem to fit what we have in our ordinance. And so the question is, do we need to sit down with the Planning and Zoning Commission and try to come up with something that we are more comfortable with being firm on in the future, as far as?
I mean, we certainly could. They're looking not only at NMED regulations, but they're looking at what is the impact. They look at every application individually. What is the impact on the neighborhood? Is this house literally next door to someone else? And having 12 people running around would be perhaps a little disruptive. So they look at that as well. But the number one overriding concern they had was septic.
Yes, sir, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor. So I would suggest that we go to a 3-bedroom limitation in the A1, A2 areas, leave the commercial zone at 4 because it can tie into the septic system as it is, our septic line. I would remove the children requirement altogether and just, like you say, go with the original 2 adults or 2 persons per bedroom, and in the A1, A2, only 3-bedroom limitation. And then that will keep the size down, and it should fit within the EMD guidelines for a 3-bedroom room, house, and so forth. At least I think it would become better. We've got some mansions around here that could do a B&B or an Airbnb and have 12, 15 people, because if we don't make a limitation on the size of the number of bedrooms and the number of people going into them. So I would just say for A1, A2, let's limit it to 3 bedrooms.
And historic zone as well, because right now it's,
Well, yeah.
is lumped in.
Yeah, I-
Oh, I will point out, Counselor, that right now, in commercial zones, you can have up to 6 bedrooms.
Well,
It's
I
under
would,
code,
maybe
if you want to
let's not-
downgrade that.
We need to maybe rethink that, but in the commercial zone, you're not within most residential areas. And so I think you could accommodate that because you don't have septic, you're tied into the line.
Right.
So I don't, that may not be as big a factor, but I would, for the A1 and A2 historic areas, let's set the limits to 3 bedrooms and take the children requirement out altogether.
Is your commission planning on revisiting this to come up with a little,
I can give them a report from tonight's
Okay,
proceeding
okay.
and with the recommendation. And
all right?
Sure.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, oh, excuse me, John, go ahead.
I think Counselor Knight had her.
Oh, Counselor Knight, I'm sorry, I just saw John. Sorry.
No, I agree. I think the 3 bedrooms is appropriate. To have 6 people, 2 in each bedroom. And if it's a little kid, they may, sleep with mom and dad or have a pull-out couch or, and that's not going to be, we can't regulate that. But I think it's fair to say if it's a 3-bedroom, to have 6 people in there, and then that's it. Because I agree with Commissioner Harper, when I was reading through his notes, there's still people, they're still going to use a lot of water. So, unless it's a baby, but again, I don't think we should say anything about a baby, just, 3 bedrooms, 6 people, two people in each bedroom.
Counselor Alsobrook.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. Yeah, so I'll start now. I remember from the initial water line discussions, right? And the the state does not connect the number of bedrooms with the number of flushable fixtures in a house. So that, yeah, we're stuck with that. But thinking about anything that's tied into our wastewater line, even the individual properties have limits on, their grinder pump size and what they can handle and put in there. So I think we should be careful about allowing up to 6 bedrooms even in that zone. The other thing is, I don't think we should stay silent about children. I think we have to say something. Otherwise, it'll come back, and they'll make the case that, well, your ordinances don't say that. Children aren't adults, and they aren't considered people, and, I can make up a million arguments. I'm not sure the best way to handle that. Maybe it's just to say explicitly, 2 per bedroom, including, family members, older than 2, something that's not.
Perhaps just the word 2 occupants. Occupants denotes
might do it.
a human. And I think legally, we could probably
We'll need
sustain that.
Counselor Audio's input on
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think, because the way it's written now,
Oh,
I could do a field trip with 2 chaperones and myself and bring in 15 10-year-olds, and we would have a blast.
Absolutely. The neighbors might not like it, but you could legally under our code right now. Yeah.
Go ahead, Counselor Burkett.
So a couple things. One is, I don't think these are policies that we're enforcing on homeowners, because we're not asking any of them how many kids they have. Every rule we make for them is just the number of bedrooms, and they could have 32 kids living in their house. And if they live there full-time, we have no policy to prohibit that. But if somebody wants to come spend one night in Corrales, we have a really big problem with 7 people being in a 3-bedroom house. So I do think that, it's something we're not enforcing for the people that are here full-time, and it, in my mind, becomes more difficult to enforce it for the people that are here part-time. And I don't think we want to enforce it on the people that are here full-time, because we can't because of the Fair Housing Act, even if we were so inclined. So I was looking up some stuff. There's something called the Keating Memo in regards to the Fair Housing Act, which suggests a 2+1 formula, where you say 2 times the number of rooms plus 1, just to add 1 extra kind of person that's going to sleep on a couch or an infant or whatever the case may be, where there's a little bit more flexibility built into the formula. And then are we enforcing this just on people that sleep in the house, or people that are physically present at any point in time?
It's for folks staying overnight. And I will point out the difference. You're right. We have no jurisdiction over families in a home. But this is, a short-term rental is a request to use a home for a business use. It's now a business endeavor. I like that idea of what you just said, the, 2 per bedroom and then 1 extra, perhaps.
Yeah, just a
to
spare.
throw
What
them
did
in
you
there.
call that? Could you repeat that?
It's 2+1. The memo was called the Keating memo. and-
Keating?
Yeah, Keating, Keating.
Keating, okay.
And then so I guess my next point, if it's for just people that are sleeping there, there's not a lot of water usage that's gonna happen while people are sleeping. So if there's 41 people there in the day, and then all of a sudden, 35 of them go home and 6 of them sleep there, and then the other 35 come back in the morning, we're still getting a ton of water usage, and all we're enforcing is how many people are sleeping in the beds.
We do have something in the code that prohibits events.
Right, right, and I know homeowners can probably enforce that as well, but I think that we're gonna have a limit of 6, and there's gonna be 12 or 15 for a barbecue over the course of the day, and hopefully they're all quiet and well-behaved, and everybody thinks that they're great neighbors, but they're gonna use all their water while they're awake, and the only time we're counting them is when they're asleep.
I don't know if I agree with that totally, because you can be in the house and be awake and not be asleep, so it's still an occupancy.
Yes, sir,
Mayor,
Councilman.
a quick question for Councilor Burkett. Keating memo, it's 2 plus 1, so it's a total of 9 potentially? or
On a
a total-
4-bedroom. Yeah, like, it would be 9 on a 4-bedroom, so it's two per room plus 1, no matter how many rooms there are.
Oh, I
Just-
see. Okay, so,
Yep.
so in this, so it'd be total 7 then?
Correct, on a 3-bedroom, it would be 7.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But, and it doesn't differentiate ages or special needs or anything like that. It's just occupants, 2 per room plus 1 extra person.
And this is for rental property, for renting up property?
In a full disclosure, I found this looking at Fair Housing Act just to make sure we weren't stepping on any landmines. So I am about 37 seconds the expert on the Keating memo.
Okay, so is it,
Maybe paragraph 2 is very, very different than what I just said, but paragraph 1 was helpful.
but it's in the Fair Housing Act?
It was, when you looked up Fair Housing Act and short-term occupancy, it's something that I found. And it said
Okay.
to refer to the Keating memo, and that one of the ways to address this was a 2+1 policy.
Well, Stuart, did you have a comment or a question?
I'm sorry?
Did you have a comment or a question?
Well, yeah, my comment was that occupant doesn't have to be asleep all the time. They can be awake and in the house. So, I mean, I don't think that's a fair assumption saying that they're only there to sleep. So anyway, I'm getting ready to go up to Wichita, and I'm going to be staying in an Airbnb as well. And this place has got up to 16 beds in it. I mean, it's just will be 5 of us in there.
Well, beach houses have a lot of beds
I
too,
know.
and they're on septic tanks.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is I think it's not a fair assumption to say that they're there just to be in the bed and sleep.
Right.
Short-term rental is like Lori said, it's a business. And it's like a hotel. You may not be in that hotel all the time, but you will be in that hotel at some point, either awake or asleep. So it's a business.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Knight.
I think if we do cite the Keating issue, is that I thought it was 9, like I think you thought it was 9 too, where it's 2 plus 1 for each bedroom. So it
No,
would
it's
be-
2 times the bedroom plus 1.
Right, right. So I think that would have to be really clear, because when you first said it, that's what I thought.
Well, I think we need to find out how it's, what's the word I'm trying to find out? How is it being utilized? Where did they come up with that number? What's the rationale? We can't just, take it out of context and just apply it. If it does seem to work, that certainly gives you a little bit easier number to work with when you're going through their application and when the commission is sitting up there trying to determine if that's what they want to do. But it's the Keating memo of the Fair Housing Act. Okay. Anything else we want to talk about? Yes, sir.
Just to follow up on Councilor Burkett's comments, it's probably worth us getting an opinion from village attorney. We're going to regulate occupancy for temporary, rental purposes, but we're not regulating occupancy for the owner.
Oh, heavens no.
So, I mean, so I just like to make sure we have the right legal foundation for that, because.
No, I think
those
when you
things are
start
similar.
going from being a private residence to an Airbnb or a rental property, that's a whole different deal.
That is the difference, yes.
Can I ask, on a home occupancy business license, do we regulate how many people can be in a home occupancy business?
Well, they have to tell us how many clients, if they have clients
But
come.
do we have any policy that regulates a limit of 2 per bedroom of their business?
Essentially, our application gives them up to 20 client visits per week. And if they say they're going to go above that, typically it might not get approved because that's a little too much for a residential neighborhood. So, yeah, it's.
I mean, it seems like most of the home occupancy stuff we have is like counseling services and stuff, and if they're only getting 20 visits per week there, I mean, I guess it's part-time, it's great, but
Yeah.
it would seem like that a lot of our businesses were well above that.
If they get above that, then they are advised to find a retail storefront for their
Okay.
business. If it gets to be more than what you would normally expect in a residential neighborhood, that would be the recommendation by the commission.
And I
Probably.
think for home ocs that don't have client visits, I think there is a limit on the number of staff who can be present.
Yes, and actually in both instances, you can only have one employee who is not a resident. That's the maximum.
Okay.
If you go above that, you're probably too successful and need to,
Spring for an office.
there you go, yeah.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you coming.
And counselors, the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is May 17th, and I'll just run these ideas by them and get their input and report back to you.
So did you want to briefly run over whether or not we want to pursue a changing of the irregular election?
Yeah, I just wanted some guidance from the council on whether we want to see this on an agenda item on a future meeting. Because it would be an ordinance that would have to be passed to opt in to the election. And so we would need to do the publish and post, saying that we're going to discuss this possible ordinance. So yeah, we just need some input from the council. When Sky and I were at the clerk's meeting just recently, they let us know that some changes to the election law did go through the state legislature this year. So one of the things that passed was the amount of money you can pay your election workers, your poll workers, has doubled from $200 a day to $400 a day. So that does increase our overall costs, which is great because it's hard to find people to work for the election. But in addition to that, previously for the municipal officers election, having a voting convenience center open the 2 Saturdays before Election Day and then that time in between, which works out to 12 days total, was optional. So last year we had, or in 2022, yeah, last year, we had voting just in the clerk's office because regardless of opening that convenience center, you still have to have voting in the clerk's office. And so to me, it seemed kind of silly to have voting across the parking lot when you're all at the exact same place anyway. And then you have to pay 3 people for those 10 hours per day, the $400 a day. So that is no longer optional. It is now a requirement. So that adds an additional $12,000 to our costs. Plus, and that's just for the election workers. And then we need additional voting machines on top of that. So about an extra $15,000 in addition to the increases we were already looking at. So we're now looking at, instead of a budget of $10,000 that we had for 2022, we're looking at $40,000 for next year.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and in the grand scheme of things, it may be a small portion of our budget, but that would cover, raises for the council. It's almost the entire pay for a police officer. It is a big chunk of money. So I think maybe discussing opting in. And I have learned that the village of San Ysidro has opted in to the general election, as has Jemez Springs. So we now have 2 municipalities here in Sandoval County that have opted in.
So, our concern, my concern, is the amount of time involved for these 2 ladies. Because I don't know if you realize what all they do. I mean, you may get an impression of what they do, but they're very busy and they do a lot. And so for that period of time,
200
they're wiped
hours.
out.
Yeah, it was 200 hours is what I put into the
And
election.
if we could do something where they don't have to do it, it would still be done here in the village. It would be done in the community center. And then we were trying to figure out a space that they could use actually in the administrative complex, the administration building, They could be locked up and could be secret. And I guess they could use my office because I spend most of my time outside anyway. But that's what this is all about. That's really the biggie. The other, and then a secondary benefit is we save 40 grand or thereabouts.
And that's just for one, you know, it adds up in 10 years, it'll be 400,000.
Well, we don't know what it'll be next year.
Yeah.
We don't know what requirement they'll have next year. Anyway, we aren't asking for any kind of, proposed disposition or whatever. We're just trying to give you the information about it, and if you are interested in more information, we will continue to collect it and get it to you. But there are some key times coming
So
up, right?
If the council does want to discuss this further, what I would like to do is bring a publish and post resolution to you next week at the May 9th meeting for approval. And then we would publish the notice of proposed ordinance, and you could still vote that down. But it would be published in the newspaper, it would be, published in the community that we were having this discussion, and then we could discuss it at the first meeting in June. And then if we did want to opt in, that would still give us time to send the ordinance to the Secretary of State's office before June 30th.
There is a time, excuse me, Councilman Mary, just a second. There is a time frame here for you guys to look at. And this would be basically a space holder is what she's talking about. Just say, okay, well, we want to keep up the opportunity or hold the opportunity to change if we want to. We just don't have to say no right now, and we don't have to say yes right now. Councilor Miera, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 points. One a statement and one a question. The statement is, I couldn't agree with you more. I had the privilege of voting when you were in your office. But I think the only point I wanted to make is there's a little bit more to not just your work, it's where you live and work. And there's just all these people right near your office and walking down, and then you have to go in there and help them, so you like abandon your office physically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a real problem of having it there, if you're gonna have it anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you don't have it there, then you're gonna have to have it over
We can't.
there, and you can't, that's right.
So
You can't do that, because you have to be here.
our election code actually says in the clerk's office.
In the
And I
clerk's
called the
office.
Secretary of State last year and I said, my office is not big enough to have 5, because the other part of this is you have to have space for 5 people to vote at one time. And I said, my office is not big enough, can I do it at my community center? And they said, no. And
I
so,
guess you need a bigger office then.
yeah, there we go, let's just remodel the whole,
More than 40,000, but yes. So that was my first point, is I think I just wanted to expand on that one, that
And
I
it-
just saw the influx of people coming in.
It did cause some issues, like our receptionist said she got nothing done because she was constantly letting people through the door, and, I know our village administrator couldn't hold meetings, because people were standing out there and like, hey, what you doing in there?
Exactly.
And same thing with our finance director, people were looking in her office and making comments about her fancy chair, and, it was very disruptive to the office as a whole, not just my work.
So, Mr. Mayor, that was the point. That the question was, if we did opt, and the new monies that we have to put up, of course, that's a given, but we're responsible for making sure that those are fully operative individuals. So if somebody's short, we got to find somebody to fill in that, because you cannot have, well, this is all we could do, Your Honor, not Your Honor per se, but the Red Book. We couldn't find anybody else, and so that's all we have is 3 people today. We need 4, but we don't have. We're responsible. If we make that commitment, we've got to find them, and we're going to pay them, but we've got to find them. And I just don't know if that's the capability in Corrales to do that. 1R, 1D, 1.
Exactly. We have a very large percentage of registered Democrats in the village, and I was only able to find, I think it was 3 Republicans and 2 independents. The rest of the 12 people I hired were Democrats. And so I had to put people on, because I need to have 3 separate election boards, one to verify the results for the absentee voting, one to verify results for early voting, and one for election day voting. So there's 3 teams of people that have to have, various makeup of registered voters. And that was difficult. I actually needed more than 12 people, and 12 was all I could get.
So I just want to bring up my point there.
Yes, sir. Councilor Woolman.
Yes, Mayor, Councilor, Melanie,
Yeah.
if we decide to opt in, physically, what's the layout then for voting? How would that change? If
So-
the red book, whatever it's called, requires it to be in the clerk's office,
It wouldn't require that then.
because Sandoval County is now.
Right, so those first 2 weeks, it would actually be in the county clerk's office.
Oh. So they couldn't
So
vote
it wouldn't
as
be,
well.
so it wouldn't be our clerk's office, it would be the county clerk's office. And then in that period of the convenience centers opening up, that's when the community center would open up. So it would just be like, any other election in November. You could go to the clerk's office and early vote starting a month before the election. And then the 12 days before the election day, you could come here and vote. And then election day voting would still be at the rec center and then at Sandia View.
So it'd be very lonely in your office for that period of time.
It would be.
Councilor
I
Burkett.
have plenty of other visitors.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think, it would be my suggestion that we don't really discuss many more of the pros and cons, and we just put this on the docket, and we have an open discussion with the public, with public comment, and we've talked about it 4 or 5 meetings now. Whether we want to talk about it publicly, we might as well just put it on the agenda, have a public conversation, get public input, and decide yes or no, and roll with that for the next 2 years. So that would be my suggestion, instead of talking about details, so we can talk about details again some other time in the future.
Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, I would like to request a detailed budget of what it would cost us to do the election if we do it in-house ourselves. So how many hours, how many people, what's the cost, machines, time, et cetera. So if we can have that at our next meeting, that would be great.
And one more thing, Melanie, because I know you're short on things to do, but I know there were some pros in the agenda of doing it, but there are some cons. Like one of them is for early voting, people have to drive to Sandoval County offices. If we could get a list of some of the cons that we need to be thinking about as well, just so we can discuss those as well.
And it would just be that initial 2-week period.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that is
Okay.
something. If there are any other specific questions, I do have, I did finally hear back from somebody at the Secretary of State's office just this morning. And so if there's some specific questions that you want answered, I can try and get them before next Tuesday from the Secretary of State's office.
Councilor Wallman.
Melanie, if it's available, could we have a list of the municipalities that have agreed to opt in, either both in Sandoval County across the state?
I do know Sandoval County so far is just San Ysidro, the village of San Ysidro, and Jemez Springs. I did ask that question of the Secretary of State just today. As far as statewide, I don't know how many places have opted in.
Okay, right,
I
thank
just
you.
know from the clerks meeting, the majority of clerks, their municipalities have already opted in. So, and there is the option, if you can go through 2 election cycles. If we decide we don't like having them run our election, we can take it back by ordinance. But you have to go through 2 election cycles so that everybody gets reelected.
Yes, John.
Just a comment, it's good they put in a provision that we can change our minds and that this is not a permanent change. But if we do decide to do this and we discover that there is some downside to it, we don't undo it, we just go back to the way we are. So whatever consequences come from this decision, stay for the next 2
The
years.
odds of changing back are slim. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying, changing back or not, if there is any downside, it happens and it stays and it's part of the record. And that's what our voters and our citizens will have had to go through for 4 years. So at every step of the way, this is an experiment on our citizens.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you very much, Melanie.
Thank you.
So, next steps for ACE. Mr. Schuman, did you want to come up and talk, or was Mr. Krieger, oh, he's already gone. Yeah.
Did he leave his bag, though? Oh, is it Angela's? Okay.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you, Zach.
You as well.
Thank you. For the record, I'm John Schuman. I was chair of the ACE committee that was dissolved as of our last meeting with you on the 11th of April. And now FACE has taken over where ACE basically left off. There are several things that we would like to proffer. First, we had our first FACE meeting at our home on Friday night after the 11th, where alcoholic beverages were served. And we'll have our first meeting, formal meeting on the 8th. And just to make the record clear, we are not meeting in community buildings. We're meeting either in Ann Taylor's home or Ann Taylor's office or my home. There are several things that we would like to accomplish. And you hinted at this, Zach, when we last visited with you on Zoom. But we would like to get a memorandum of understanding underway to make sure that FACE can act as a fiscal agent for the community so that we have some credibility as we go about raising funds. We would also like to have in that memorandum of understanding something to the effect that FACE is the party that's representing the community seeking further input, going back to John's comments at our last board meeting, or at our last village council meeting, seeking input and seeking some support. And so those are the two components of the memorandum of understanding. In terms of marketing, we've already begun, as I shared with you when we were together on the 11th, we've begun our marketing program, and we want to continue that with focuses on a couple of things. First, additional community input, and secondly, beginning to gain some leverage with organizations, for instance, that weren't represented at the meeting on the 11th. We have specific plans of outreaching to FACE, or excuse me, to the CHAMP and to the Tractor Club, and certainly the Kiwanis and others, with a specific focus on PTAs. We've met with the principals of Cottonwood and Corrales Elementary. They're supportive, and they're willing to work with us in terms of generating PTA support for this. One of the things that we have is we need to develop a timeline so that we don't overshoot our goal of raising money and getting the project appropriately funded. And to do that, we would really like to have some timeline, if you will, about any future bonding that might be undertaken by the village in support of the ACE Center. You know, if we know that interest rates are going to make any bond issue more expensive, but if we can get some feel for the amount and for the timing of things, that would be very helpful to us as we plot our activities going forward for the next 2 or 3 years. That's about it. But thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We'll certainly look into all of those things that you've requested in the future. And now I want to hear from Anthony Martinez, our Fire Chief Extraordinaire. Please, sir.
Mayor, council, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'll do, might do the next, obviously.
So I'm going to go over, we have a lot of irons in the fire with this water project. Mayor, council, first off, I'd like to say thank you for all the support. It's been a good year and we have a lot to look forward to. As far as the Clearwater State Revolving Fund, we have went out, we had seek for an RFP for construction and management of the Angel Tower water tank, and design how that's going to incorporate basically into the rest of our system that we've been putting together in the village. That has to be posted for 45 days. Of course, that money comes with real strict guidelines. So, you know, the clerk's office, myself, you know, and Tanya, we're, you know, reviewing all that, making sure that we got all the checks done. Our plan is to use the $300,000 for the capital outlay that we received this year and matching funds from the Clearwater State Revolving Fund to complete that project. And I want to emphasize that project is for, you know, building the tank and a well. Currently, I'm looking at all the funds to see if we have enough money to maybe tie the infrastructure down Angel Road to connect to Loma Larga. But I'll go over in more detail what we're doing with all the other funds as well. Any questions on the Clearwater State Revolving Fund and our uses on that and how we're going?
So the Clean Water State Revolving Fund is $75,000 plus $500,000 for planning, design, and construction as far as you can go, basically. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the $1 million you got from the legislature, or we got from the legislature, that's for construction. And then the 300,000 that we got for, oh, actually, we got 1.6 million. We got 600,000 from Brenda McKenna. And then the 300,000 for the tank. That gives us 1.9 to go from the tank down the road to as far as we can go into the, should be able to join the circle of the loop of water that you have.
Correct. So I'm trying to utilize the 1.6 million, and I want to spend that money quickly because it's a general fund.
Right.
And we would, looking at the calculation of the most impact for 1.6 million would be to continue our Andrews Lane project.
Okay, all right.
So that's where the dilemma, again, I have multiple projects and trying to prioritize the money. So the 1.6, if we spent that total on Angel Hill, there's two things. One, it's not gonna impact as much residents and coverage. And two, I don't know if I'll be able to spend that money by this year.
Gotcha. All right, I understand. It's a priority thing.
It's a priority thing.
We want to be sure we can fight a fire in the Bosque.
Correct.
Yes.
So, that's kind of where we're at. And again, for lack of better terms, everything's really fluid. Things are changing very rapidly. And I'll go over those details. So Angel Tower, we're hoping to get the tank built and a well and have fire suppression on the west end of Angel, and if money allows, start extending that infrastructure down the hill. Loma Larga, our goals for Loma Larga fire suppression system is we'd like to continue south on the line. We just completed right there by Ella. We'd like to continue south to Coronado. That's kind of our trigger point there. And we'd like to go north to Camino de la Tierra, roughly. And we want to see, I have to get price quotes. One of my high priority areas in the village is where we have the industrial area, the Academy, Orion, we have the Pete Nieto's construction office, we have 2 schools, and we have absolutely no water there. So that's a high priority for me to try to get water into the Academy area, and we're really close. We already have water at Angel. We just need to extend it so we can cut across. And I'm looking for easements right now where we can make that connection. Andrews, now that we are moving forward with the Andrews Lane, our goal is to go north from the school, which we already have a hydrant right behind the school. We'd like to go to Dixon and possibly maybe to the Bosque down Dixon. That's, again, like Maris mentioned, we want to try to protect our Bosque and the residents there, and we're really close. And we'd like to go south, and if we have enough money, we'd like to go south all the way to La Entrada and cut across and maybe possibly run a hydrant to the village complex. Instead of the big water tank, have a pressurized water source here. And so we're looking at that. Rec Center, that pumping project there, we would like to go south to Coronado to impact more businesses and the school. We have a Cottonwood Montessori that has no hydrants. So if we can get closer to that school, the better. And now, and I don't know if I'm calling it right, but I believe it's called the Anderson property, which is now Village of Corrales owned. So now that we've acquired that property, well, I'd like to extend our line from the rec center to our property, protect our assets, put the infrastructure in. So that's, again, when I say it's fluid, things are changing, and I'll have to work with Mike Chavez in the village to see what the best route is to run a line and get it further north in the rec center to impact, again, more businesses. If I put a hydrant on the very north end of that property, well, you know, that's going to help all these businesses here, like Village Pizza, for better fire suppression and coverage. So, and the main station, our goal is still trying to make that connection for the San Isidro through the church, which we already has started the progress. We have a contractor working from Loma Larga through the Archdiocese property at the cemetery. And we hope to connect the Loma Larga system to the main station system, so it increases my water capacity and helps with redundancy. And APS this summer, when school is out, they're going to be making the connection from APS system to the Village of Corrales fire suppression system. So lots of things are happening. They're happening all over the village, but really good stuff. Again, it's just a matter of trying to prioritize, close out this fund, start opening up new stuff.
It's really difficult to spend all that money, isn't it?
I'll do it. And now, you know, again, after our last council meeting and hearing, you know, all the funds for our general fund, and, you know, there is a possibility that, you know, they could take that money away if we have an emergency. And so it's in my best interest to try to spend that money as quickly as possible. Right now, you know, we are allocated the money, but to the best of my knowledge, we have not heard when we're going to receive that. But as soon as we do, we are going to fast track it before you to get a BAR, a budget, and we can start spending that money. The good thing is with the general fund, doesn't come with the Clearwater like requirements where we have to go out for bid. We can use some of our other contracts that we have out there and piggyback. So I'm hoping we can, you know, really get this done quickly for you. Any questions?
Councilor Knight?
Yeah, so those fire hydrants that are along Loma Larga, are they ready to go?
Yep, fully functional.
So-
Tested, flow tested.
So the water is already in those pipes between? Okay, that is
Yep.
super.
So
That's what I was
the-
hoping.
The hydrant that, you know, as you see them on Loma Larga, if
Right.
there's a black trash bag on them, that means they're out of service. And once we did Ella, went ahead and did hydrostatic testing, we did flow testing, and it's fully functional.
Great.
As we move along, we just extend that system, so, from the Loma Larga tank. Yep.
Thank you.
Councilor Waldman?
Just two quick questions. One, the Angel Hill project, how deep do you have to go for that well? How many feet is that?
So, once we retain you know, go out, well, we went out for bid, but once we retain, you know, we award the contractor, they'll have to determine exactly. I've been told approximately 600 feet, because we're at 5,255 feet at the very top of that. And going by elevation of like Loma Larga is like 5,020. And looking at average depth of residential homes in that area vary from 200 to 300 feet. They're estimated 600 feet, which is going to be difficult for us because we're going to have to, it's such a deep well, and we only have single phase power up there. We're going to have to figure something out, so.
The second question is a bit more substantive. Could you explain a little bit about the wastewater system on Loma Larga and what that actually means for the residents eventually?
Wastewater would be for.
Michael's going to talk about
Public
that.
Works, yeah.
Michael will come up and talk about
Hi.
that. We're just doing fire suppression right now.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So if you come down Angel Road, are you going to have to tear up the road at all and lay the line, or you do everything within the right-of-way?
That's a very good question. We'd have to look at, you know, we don't want to tear up the road because it just got paved.
Yeah.
So we have to determine what side of the road would be the, you know, have less utilities. But we'd like to not tear up the road and go along an easement. However, without looking at, you know, the easements and the property, you know, it's not anywhere in our funds to buy property for private property owners. So we'll have to look at that. And again, that's why this project, if we were going to run the pipe down that hill, would take longer than I think we'd be able to spend this money.
So how much property do we have up on Angel Hill?
It's roughly 2 acres.
Is there sufficient room for a solar facility to assist in the pumping?
It could be, yeah. I mean,
Is that an option then?
it is an option. At one time, we looked at state funding to help us with solar voltaic, you know, PV system with battery backup to help us with the emergency communication center. So that can always be modified. So that's already engineered for the radio tower for the emergency radio. And I think we could probably be incorporated to help with the well. The design of the tank is only going to be gravity fed, so we're not looking at putting a fire height, pumps. So it'd just be power to power the well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much,
You're
Anthony.
welcome. Thank you.
So, Director Chavez, would you please come tell us about this sewer line you're building? Trying to build, sorry.
This is what we had on our bid. Engineers. And I won't give everybody a copy. Sir. Well, he has a digital, something larger, like me.
Thank you, Mike.
So much like before,
And this is an outline of what I'm requesting from the engineer.
Good to see you in person. Yeah, no, and I need one of those. Yeah, thanks.
so like before, John, we have to get a PER, and then we have to go through a design plan, and this is then basically presented to the village for, as an alternative, something we can have in case of need. As communities, as the community needs a relief from septic tanks and leach fields, which is becoming a bigger issue, we would like to have something in place that can deal with that. It won't happen probably in the next couple of years, Michael, you think? But
No,
in
it's
10 or 15, we could be looking at a problem.
10 to 15 years probably. But the design that I'm going for now, I want this line that we will be installing to be able to carry the sewage from the whole village. We want to start probably up on Loma Larga with a gravity line that can take all the wastewater from this step system.
And that's important because it gives us a relief,
gives us a bypass.
deal with, if we have an obstruction in the step system.
Yep. So all the residents east of Crowless Road, we will leave them on a step system. We'll just leave that intact. It'll connect to the new system. The only issue we're gonna have is everything west of Crowless Road will probably have to be grinder pumps. So we're gonna have to make sure we have a series of check valves. So we can't get that flow coming back unless we, for any reason. We don't want it coming back. We just want to be able to go up the road. From Old Church Road, and I put north instead of south, we already have a 3-inch wastewater line there at the old church. So part of the phasing would be like a phase 1, we would carry that all the way to La Entrada, up to Loma Larga, and then down south to the city of Albuquerque. Phase 2 would be all the way to the Harvey Jones Canal. And I want them to design a crossing right away, so we're step ahead of everything.
And this would be a totally different system than it's on Cerrillos, the one that's already put in.
Yeah, it'll be totally different, but we can take all this wastewater and put it into it if we need to.
This is a real system.
Yeah.
This is what we wanted to put in 17 years ago. And this will basically be able to take the step water, dirty water, the grinder pumps, and gravity flow if you have designs for gravity flow.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of this is going to be done by engineers, and this is all conceptual on Michael's part, which is really, actually very good, Michael.
So the grinder pumps for west of Crowless Road up to Loma Larga, so that's still, so those residents need to maintain the tanks for solids, right? And so
grinder
the
pump
grinder is
takes
just to,
everything.
just to make it so it can flow.
Just so we can pump it up to
Uphill.
Loma Larga, which will be a gravity system.
But the grinder pump, correct me if I'm mistaken, but if they have a grinder pump, The advantage of the grinder pump is it all leaves, solids.
Right.
And liquids.
It's not like the step system here where the grinder.
Not like, did you call it a SCUT system?
Step.
Oh, step, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you.
What did you say?
I called it a SCUT system.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure what that
Don't
means,
object
but I'd say how I feel about it sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
A grinder pump will eliminate the need of a septic tank completely.
Okay. So that's different from the step system?
yes.
Okay, gotcha.
The other thing we'll do is we will have it designed large enough, and my thoughts are on Corrales Road from Old Church Road to the far north end, we can actually bring it both ways onto Todo Los Santos into the gravity system on Loma Larga.
So we would keep a step system on Corrales Road,
The existing one,
only the existing one.
only the existing one.
Okay, any further expansion except for Priestley Corval? Is it going to be step system?
They will be on a step, so anything east of Corrales Road.
East of,
East of Corrales Road
will be step?
up to Old Church,
Okay,
because we already have this system in place.
right, okay. But if we go north,
We can do grinder pumps.
okay. I didn't catch that
Yeah,
at
we
one
can do a
time.
grinder pump system, and that would be designed to connect to the gravity system at Todo Los Santos.
And having a gravity flow system allows us to take everything that we generate in our sewer system. Yes, sir, Council Murray.
Yeah, thank you. So with the grinder pumps, are we going to have a spatial assessment district for these installations? And how much are we going to get charged? I mean,
Actually, we're going to try to get it all funded. That's the goal.
I mean, that's nice pie in the sky, but the reality may be that.
Well, we can't do it all. I mean, it's kind of like the fire suppression system. We can't do it all at one time, so we try to get it funded. So this past year, we focused on the fire suppression system. We will
much-
continue to focus on the sewer line. We
How
do
much
have access to
increase our
funds.
cost to the Albuquerque water.
I was
system?
talking and trying to answer your
Sorry.
question.
I'm sorry.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Well, I was just curious about the increased cost to the Albuquerque water system. Then if we're dumping all this waste into theirs, they're going to want more money, I would presume.
So I talked to Mark Sanchez, and he said, all you have to do is fill out years ago, they made a deal to get some money with the state, and dealing with our sewage was part of that deal to get the money. So they're supposed to take our sewage, all of it, for the entire village.
Cool.
So that, we'll get charged, just like anybody gets charged for sewage. But as far as putting the system in, we're looking for funds to do that.
Okay.
Infrastructure funds.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I don't want to do special assessment districts. I mean, I don't want to put that on
I'm
people.
looking at hookups to houses and so forth.
Well, that could be an issue. Because we couldn't do that because that'd be violating the anti-donation clause. But,
Yeah, I understand. So that's my concern would be, what would the hookup cost to a person, and do we have to have a spatial assessment
Correct.
district?
okay, the hookup cost, we can determine that. I mean, a contractor can determine that. And there should not be a need for a special assessment district to put in the sewer system itself, the municipal sewer system. That's not our goal, not our plan. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm interrupting you. You go
Oh,
ahead.
That's good. Pretty much about it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So just a quick question, and this is very long range, but what does the process look like then to tie in all of the residential streets into these main artery lines that we're putting in? I mean, obviously the one down the village center or down Corrales Road now, I mean, it touches a very small percentage of the people that live on that stretch, just because once you're more than probably 100 feet or so off the road, you're not tied into it. I mean, I assume that is a significant project, and it's going to be years and years and years.
So right now, my main focus is to get the main line in, and to make sure it's sized large enough to take all the sewage from all of Corrales.
Yep.
And one thing I did throw in on these engineers is, like on Loma Larga, let's say Coronado Road, for example. It's gonna have to be a drop manhole. I don't want a contractor coming in, let's say we get the money in 5 years to connect Coronado, I don't want them to have to dig down to the bottom again, maybe 20 feet deep. I want that drop manhole design, and the contractor will install that now. So we would probably just maybe have a 5-foot cut across the road, 5 foot deep.
And I think along that same thought process, I'd love to explore a way that whenever anybody's working, when we're working on any of these roads or we're doing any new road development, that we're burying a line every time we're fixing a road, so we don't have to come back and ever tear up any road that we just fixed within the past 5 or 10
Right.
years. Just bury a dead line, cap it on both ends, and that way when we do have the artery, the road is already, or the pipe to the people that actually live there is already somewhat in place, and we're not having to re-tear things up in the future. So I don't know how we would do that, if we could make some sort of ordinance say, or anytime we're digging a trench, or we're putting in a road, or we're doing a development, that's now part of our process for development, is you have to bury a line that goes close to a proposed artery at some point.
We could make that a policy. I wouldn't want to mandate that as an ordinance, but it could be a policy. And, you know, these guys are really good about finding pipe, putting pipe in, even pipe that doesn't have anything in it. I mean, Anthony put in pipe a long time ago before he had water to put in it.
Right.
I shouldn't say a long time ago, but some time ago. But no, I think we can do a policy to that effect, because we're concerned, and it's I mean, it's like 16, 17 years ago when this first came up about the sewer line, and here we are now. In 16, 17 years, we may be needing that sewer line, just like we might be needing that water line. We don't know that. But one of the things Anthony didn't tell you about the water line is he's using potable water quality pipe, so that if we had to convert to a water system, that would not be as difficult as trying to put in a whole new set of pipes and lines. Did I say that correctly? All right. Yeah. It's not something I think about all the time, but,
Only when you're awake, huh?
well, you know, I can't go too far without these two guys, you know, grabbing a hold of me, it seems like. Or I grab a hold of them. Does anybody have any questions?
Just
Yes, sir.
One quick one. You're about to do sometime the next year or so Sagebrush Drive from Loma Larga all the way to from Loma Larga to the west end. Would that be an opportunity to put a pipe in there as well?
The time constraints on this, no, we have to have that money spent.
Okay.
But to tell you the truth, the way that the Corrales is shaped up above Loma Larga, I mean, it's natural, the gravity flow would be natural. So you're a minimum depth. And something like that, they can directional bore that nowadays.
Just to avoid Councilor Burkett's point about digging up a road.
Oh, I agree with
just-
him totally.
Yeah. And Sagebrush is going to be completed by when?
I'm hoping this winter.
Thank you.
I want to get it done, believe me.
Want me off your back, I know that.
Okay, anybody, okay. Well, I think we have completed the agenda, and so we'll adjourn this work study.